Learners, please mute your
Good morning,
microphones.
sir.
Good morning.
Okay, sir.
Please mute your microphones so that we can start our
Okay, sir.
class. Okay. So in the last class, we have already 5 classes, and we discussed the medieval age, the Renaissance age, the metaphysicals, the Victorians, the Augustans, the classicals. Now today we shall be discussing romantic poetry. Romantic poetry, and we shall be covering 2 books, that is book 6 and book 7. They altogether include the romantic age of
So we
English.
will open block 6, sir.
Yes, block 6. Block
Okay, sir.
6.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
So block 6 and 7 we shall discuss.
Okay, thank you.
So, um, I just went up English literature. So we shall have an idea that what exactly we mean by romantic. So in literature, romantic is a movement. It is a literary movement just after the French Revolution. So French Revolution took place in 1789. So after the revolution had a tremendous impact in all fields of life, and obviously it is in literature also. So basically speaking, I shall come to the definition meaning of romanticism, but basically speaking, the historians of English literature, they designated this the period that is from 1798 to 1832. I repeat the time, the period 1798 to 1832 as the Romantic period. So why it is 1798? Because in 1798 we find a great work published, that is lyrical ballads. Lyrical ballads was published uh, in 1798, and the work was a collaborative work of the 2 famous Romantic poets. They are Wordsworth, William Wordsworth, and S.T. Coleridge, Samuel Taylor Coleridge. So Wordsworth and Coleridge published the book Lyrical Ballads in 1798, and that book clearly defines the theory of romantic poetry. We shall come to that later on. So that is the beginning of a literary movement called Romantic period or Romantic movement. And the period ended with the death of Sir Walter Scott in 1832, a novelist. So this period, as Romantic period, it affected the whole Europe. And Romanticism or Romantic movement in English literature is an outcome of the impact of French Revolution. Because French Revolution in 1789, just the opposite, 1798, just the opposite, 1789, was a shattering and sudden event because it was not a pre-planned one. On July 14th, 1789, it was a Sunday, and the people of France, they were totally discontent, discontented with, dissatisfied with the reign of Louis XIV. So they were not daring, they didn't dare for a revolution. But on a particular Sunday, when the king ordered the army, military to make a march past in the town, the people were afraid that it was going to be an attack on them, and they attacked the fort of Bastille and Queen Mary Antoinette. Subsequently, the king was guillotined, and Queen Mary Antoinette was also guillotined. So this period, the French Revolution, that was possible because you see, when we are entering into the romantic age of English literature is totally a contrast to the earlier age, that is Augustan age, what we call classical age. And the concern of classical age, Augustan age, was on, yes,
Sir,
yes,
sir, sir, July 14, Sunday 17, sir, July 14, Sunday
yes,
1789, people of France dissatisfied with
Louis
who?
14th, King, Jar.
Okay,
Then,
sir.
so why
Okay,
this
sir.
French Revolution took place? Because French Revolution created an awareness in the created a political awareness in the mind of the people by a political thinker, that is Jean-Jacques Rousseau, whom we popularly known as Rousseau, Rousseau. Rousseau. The life is from 1712 to 1778. So Rousseau was a political thinker, and his political philosophy was reflected in some of his books. One is Discourse on Inequality, and another was Confessions. And he interpreted the social contract theory to create political awareness in the mind of the people, and that resulted a kind of um, awareness for liberty, equality, and fraternity. The freedom, the fraternity, the brotherhood, and liberty, equality, and fraternity, equality among the people. So it was a kind of democratic spirit, democratic awareness that is coming into the mind of the French people. So we shall not go into that detail, but the French Revolution created political awareness in the mind of the people because of Rousseau, the political thinker Rousseau's works like Discourse on Inequality, Social Contract Theory, and Confessionals. So this French Revolution, which had a tremendous influence to begin a new era in the history of mankind, in the history of Europe at least. So after the French Revolution, after the guillotine of killing of Louis XIV and Queen Marie Antoinette, there was a replacement of hierarchy with new slogan of liberty, equality, and fraternity. And the new form of society promised for an egalitarian society, middle class society, egalitarian society. And as a result of which, we for the first time find that literature was also democratized. Democratization of literature took place in English literature after the French Revolution. So what we mean by this democratization of literature? Democratization of literature means for the first time the literary interest, the literary focus was laid on the ordinary people. Because before this, we find that the subject matter of literature, the subject matter of poetry, or whatever you may say, was on the people who were especially belonging to the higher section of the society. So the democratization of literature means the poets of that age,
Hello, sir.
their, yes,
Excuse me, sir. Who is speaking now?
book 6 and 7, romantic poetry.
Which
Okay.
page, sir? Page number?
Page. You go to the first 20 pages of the book 6. First 20
Okay.
pages. Okay.
Thank you.
Introduction part. So please meet. Okay. So the poet Thomas Gray. Thomas Gray. Probably we can call him the first romantic because Thomas Gray wrote a poem, an elegy, written in the country churchyard. So in that particular elegy, the poet is lamenting over the farmers, among the farmers uh, who were buried in the graveyard of the country churchyard. or the graveyard of the church of the village. Country means village. So I mean the attention was directly drawn upon the peasants, the farmers, and they had continuously been neglected by literature since the literary interest, the literary focus was always on the higher class of the hierarchical society. So it was definitely a step of literature towards the support of democracy, or you may call it the democratization of literature. So obviously, when you talk of democratization of literature, your interest will, or your form of literature will not be epic, not be tragedy, because epic and tragedy is a form of drama. So epic and tragedy were the grand works, grandeur was there, sublimity was there. So that sublimity of literature, grandeur quality of literature was rejected, and the grandeur quality, the epic and tragedy, who were at the height of apex of literary pyramid, on the top of literary pyramid, they were turned down, they were rejected to the simpler poems like lyric, ode, elegy, ballad, etc. We shall discuss what are these forms of poems. So in the new forms, the new interest were, invested for the formulation of lyric poems, odes, elegies, ballads, etc. And yes, any doubt?
Sir, democratization literature means again, please.
What is democracy? Democracy means emphasis to equality for all people. So earlier, what was happening in Augustan literature, a subject of literature, the people who were narrated in the literature, they were always the people from higher section. So when Thomas Gray wrote the poem Elegy written in country churchyard, then in this poem the subject is not the people from high class, the subject is the people, the ordinary farmers who were buried in the graveyard in the country churchyard. Churchyard means the graveyard behind the church. So the attention of the poets, that was shifted from the grandiousness of literature to the ordinariness of literature. I mean, focus was given on the common people. Why? Because after the French Revolution, the emphasis for an egalitarian society, middle class society, or liberty, equality, and fraternity was emphasized. So as a result of which, literature also moved towards that. So it was a kind of movement of romantic poetry where the earlier trend of the earlier classical trend, the earlier trend of sublimity or grand quality of literature, that was rejected, that was turned down, and literature was focused on the ordinary subject, ordinary people, and their common interest in all those things. That is what we mean by democratization of literature. And what else was there? That in Augustan age, in the classical age that you discussed in the previous class, last class, the poets, they were emphasizing on the poet were focusing the subject matter of they were dealing with the society and the elitist group of society. So obviously their language, their diction used in the poem was erudite. It was what you say hi-fi. The language was elite speech, educated speech. It was meant for the educated people. But in romantic poetry, the diction or the language used in the poem that changed into simple language. What kind of simple language? The language, the speech used by common man in everyday life. So once again, we shall come to the features of romantic poetry. But what I'm trying to introduce before you is that the romantic movement in English literature was a direct outcome of the consequence of French Revolution, because French Revolution emphasized on the establishment of three things. One is a replacement of hierarchy with a new social order where everybody was given equal importance. That is with the slogan of liberty means freedom, equality, equal for all, and fraternity means brotherhood. The second thing was that literature was democratized, and the third thing was that the form of literature changed from tragedy and epic to lyric, elegy, ode, ballad, and with a simple form of language, the diction, the poetic language was changed from the erudite speech, elite speech to the common speech.
Sir,
So that
please.
that was the yes,
Sir, last point,
yes.
please.
Last
Last
point was
point, sir.
that the elite speech, the language part, the elite
Yes, sir.
speech or the erudite diction, ERUDITE, erudite diction was changed to speech of common man or common language. Language was changed from the hi-fi language to common language. So these are some of the points. And why French Revolution took place? French Revolution took place because of the influence of the political thinker Rousseau's work, that is, discourse on inequality, confessions, and social contract theory. So that is the historical part we discussed. Now, French Revolution.
Sir, it's a social contrast theory or contract theory?
Contract, CONTRACT, contract.
Okay, contract
social
theory.
contract theory. Contract theory. Okay. You can get it in Jean-Jacques Rousseau's biography or Wikipedia if you go there, or in book also there. In book 6 it is there. Then the French, what was the impact of French Revolution in literature and in other spheres of life or other philosophical thoughts? That we find 3 books after French Revolution. One is Reflection on the Revolution in France, written by Edmond Brooke. Reflection on the Revolution in France, published in 1790, written by Edmond Brooke. And another book, Right of Man. The name of the book is Right of Man, published in 1792 by Tom Paine, T-O-M, Tom, P-A-I-N-E, Paine, Tom Paine. And one more book, the book is Inquiry Concerning Inquiry Concerning Political Justice. Inquiry Concerning Political Justice in 1793 by William Godwin. These 3 books, they created a new kind of political awareness.
The second book.
Second book is Right of Man. Right, R-I-G-S-T, right. Manishwar Adhikar, Right of Man. Right of Man by Tom Paine.
Okay, sir.
Tom P-I-N-E, Paine, published in 1792. So these 3 books, they created so much, awareness, political awareness, social awareness in the mind of the people, that the people after French Revolution, they expected for more and more liberty, equality, and fraternity, which was practically not possible. Because even if you see democracy today, in India, we practice democratic form of government. But do you think that all people are equally treated? Definitely not. In practice, it is not possible. Because some people, social contract theory of Rousseau says that some people will always be more equal than the equals. Practically, some people will always be more equal than the equals. Because they control the society. So even if we talk about democracy, practically the ideal form of democracy, what we think, that is not possible. So as a result of which, the French public, the French society, which aspired a great expectation after the French Revolution, that was not possible. So gradually that society became chaotic. What you say, Arajakata, chaotic. French society became totally chaotic, both politically, socially, and in all spheres of life. As a result of which, the interest, the attention of the poets, that was diverted from society towards nature, because they want. So this has the influence in entire Europe. The French Revolution, the consequence of French Revolution, the anarchical form of society, and in the meantime, the reign of terror we find in Germany. So that created a kind of total anarchy in the European society. So the attention of the poets thought that if we want to get solace, if we want to get peace, then our attention should be diverted from society towards nature, Prakruti, nature. So they escaped from the society, and they turned their attention towards nature. So romantic poets are also called the escapists. Palayana Panthi escapists, because they escaped from the nature, the society. So when they escaped from the society, they went towards nature. Then it is obviously a totally a contrast to their earlier, to their predecessors. The predecessors were the Augustans, the classicals, because their interests were on the urban life, their interests were on the society, their interests were on the erudite language. Their interest was on the projection of, on the show of their wit or the knowledge. So when classical poetry, when the Western poetry was based on the intellect or wit, the romantic poetry was based on emotion. So there is a basic difference. The language you find, the difference in language you find that was erudite diction in classical poetry, but it is simple diction. And when classical poetry or the Augustan poetry were they were in the based on intelligence, they're based on wit or so intellectual. So romantic poetry is emotional. So when it is emotional, to express your emotion, and one thing is that when the Western poetry was objective, when objective means a work of art which is meant for all to for comment, but romantic poetry is subjective, personal observation, subjective, personal observation, personal feeling, personal theory. It may differ from others. So all romantic poets do not have a common theory. Even if they are romantic, even if they base their poems on imagination, their treatment of nature, treatment of imagination differs from one another. So it has just come to that. Now, after those three books, we find that the population of England, that increased, and we find the navigational exploration took place by the New World by Captain James Cook in 1771 and all that. So in economic sphere, in a political sphere, even in literary sphere, we find some changes that took place. So when I will focus on the literary sphere of romantic age, then I can find what do we find for the growth of such kind of a literature. So one thing is I gave you a clear-cut idea or the contrast between the romantic age and the earlier age, the classical age. The first point that I gave you, that when classical poetry or the Augustan poetry were intellectual, the romantic poetry became emotional. Okay, when the classical poetry use the erudite diction, elite diction, romantic poetry use the simple diction. When classical poetry wrote about society, romantic poetry wrote about nature. When classical poetry were objective, romantic poetry were subjective. When classical poetry was, they were writing satires.
Subjective in the sense individualism.
Yes, individualism, subjective. Okay, and when classical poetry were perpetual means they will be describing something in the permanent sense of the term. But romantic poetry is momentary. Momentary means for certain time, because the romantic theory says the imagination can remain in our mind for some time, not for all time to come. So we shall come to the theory in the second part. So these are some of the differences. So I mean, romanticism is a clear-cut reaction and contrast to the classicism of the earlier age, or what we say, Augustan poetry.
Sir,
Sir,
Yes,
this shift shift from neoclassical age to romantic age, those points we have discussed, these things
yes,
can be considered as the salient features of romanticism.
very much salient. They are salient features. Actually, I will come to salient feature, and
There's
once
a
again,
question in an assignment also. But I discuss the salient features of romanticism.
yes. This can be included in the salient feature. This is very much essential in the salient
Okay.
feature. Okay, then
Sir?
so when it yes.
Sir, third number point is when the romantic poet believe in nature, classical poet believe in
Society. They deal with
okay, sir.
society, social aspect.
So, what's
So
the first point? Classical focused on intellectual, romantic focused on.
emotional,
Okay, okay, thank.
emotion. Okay, I mean heart and brain. They were focusing on brain, intellectual quality, but they were focusing on heart. So emotion. Okay, so when you come to literary sphere, then in the Romantic age that I talked between 1798 and 1832, there was the growth of pamphlets and periodicals. That was also there in the earlier age also. So because when I told you that Romantic age began with the publication of lyrical ballads in 1798, and lyrical ballads was first published in the pamphlet. Sorry, in the periodicals, partly. I mean, periodicals when part episodic, part wise. So when it was published in 1798, lyrical ballads, then most of the people complained that they could not understand the theory, the poetic theory, what Coleridge and Wordsworth wanted to explain. So subsequently, after 2 years, that is in 1800, the second edition of lyrical ballads was published. Second edition, and that is very important because in the second edition, Wordsworth was senior to Coleridge, so he added a preface, introduction. So that we call as preface to lyrical ballads. So preface to lyrical ballads was added to that lyrical ballads in the second edition of 1800. So in that preface to lyrical ballads, as the senior poet Wordsworth to St. Coleridge, he very clearly gave his analysis on the Romantic theory or the theory of poetry from the subjective sense of the term. His own interpretation of poetry is given there in the preface, that is in 1800. We shall come to that poetic theory of Wordsworth, we shall discuss Wordsworth. So that is where periodicals and pamphlets that they grew in Romantic period, and the main function of those periodicals were to focus on debatable matters or controversial issues like literary changes, political reforms, social classifications, and all that. I mean, the burning topics, contemporary topics of those days. And we must not forget that after the French Revolution, the monarchical form of government was abolished and people's government was established. So parliamentary reforms by the achievement of the middle class took place after the French Revolution. So romantic writers, they lived through the momentous changes during that time in all political, economic, social, and literary spheres. And they were very much aware of that. So when they were aware of that, they could not find solace in all these spheres of society. So they sought for a liberation. They sought for a migration from society to nature. So Wordsworth was the beginner. And when they were aware of the great changes taking place around them, then the publication of a book by William Hazlitt, Hazlitt, William Hazlitt, the name of the book is The Spirit of the Age. William Hazlitt's book, The Spirit of the Age, published in 1824, it very clearly emphasizes on the awareness of the Romantic poets about their society or the type period in which they live, and why did they opt for a migration from society to nature. So because they wanted to bring something, the renewal of the world, the renewal of the society through their interpretation of, through their focus on the objects of nature, through the display of the powerful role of imagination in their poetry. So these are some of the factors historically responsible for Romantic movement. Okay, so now I'm coming to the definition of Romanticism. So dear learners, when we are the students of English literature, we must not confuse Romanticism in the ordinary sense of the term, which is related to love affair or something like that. The definition of the very word romanticism, it was not, as I told you in the metaphysical poets, that the metaphysical poets did not demand that they were metaphysicals. Metaphysical is a term coined much later. So similarly, the romantic poets, the term romantics or romanticism, it was first used by F. R. Lucas, F. R. Lucas, Lucius Lucas, F. R. Lucas, in his work, The Decline and Fall of Romantic Ideal. The Decline and Fall of Romantic Ideal in 1948. The book was published in 1948, and in that book, Romanticism, we come to the word Romanticism, and he defines that. He defines that. F.R. Lucas defines that. That is, the term Romanticism. It is a term comes from the Greek, comes from the word Rome, R-O-M-E, Rome. Comes from the word Rome, and from Rome, it is romance, R-O-M-A-N-C, romance. So what he means by romance? Romance means away from reality. So when you are away from reality, then obviously it refers to the role of imagination, because imagination can take us away from reality. So romance and away, the meaning is away from reality, and from romance it is romanticism. It becomes an ism. Ism means theory, theory of literature, romanticism. Romantic theory is otherwise called as romanticism. What is that romantic theory? We shall discuss when we refer to different romantic poets. So, in other way, romanticism was, it became a tradition, and the tradition means the bizarre kind of imagination, some odd kind of imagination. So the romanticism was first used in the late 17th century to describe paintings with certain bizarre quality. B-I-Z-A-R-R-E, bizarre means odd. Some odd qualities, some unique qualities. They were, sometimes you will be imagining flying in the sky, something away from reality. But it gradually entered into literature. So romantic writers, romantic poets, they insist on their own unique experience through different subjects, on different subjects through imagination, and they particularly give their importance on the subject of nature. So nature comes first, man second. So it implies a literary philosophical theory which tends to see the individual at the very center of all life and all experience. Human being is given importance amidst nature. An individual is placed at the center of art. So who is that in the individual? The individual is the poet and his experience. So that is why the romantic poems are subjective. It is their own way of interpretation through which they explode into the different worlds of imagination through different theories. So for them, literature is therefore an expression of the unique feelings and particular attitude of the poet, and it is opposed to the earlier age of reason, classical form, because the classical poets, they responded their age.
Hello,
Yes.
sir.
Yes.
You have said that romanticism is the objective
No, subjective.
or subjective.
Hmm.
Subjective. Yes, sir.
Subjective, not objective. Objective is the classical poetry.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So,
Okay, sir.
so a kind of a high premium upon the creative function of the imagination. You see, why do they emphasize on it? Because they have a premium focus on the creative function, creative, something to be created from your own imagination. So creative function of the imagination, because art is a formulation of intuitive, imaginative perception of the poet. For them, art is a formulation of poetry is a formulation of the intuitive imagination. How you imagine, how you invent through your imagination and through your perception of nature around you. And it is the nobler truth of the art that they argue or that they make their logic on it. So in 18th and 19th century, we find that romantic poetry is primarily a kind of poetry that is based purely on the function of imagination for artistic projection in an emotional way through subjective exploration into the world of imagination. So obviously, romanticism is characterized by its emphasis on emotion and individualism. Emotion and individualism. So when emotion and individualism or subjectivity is there, and there is no question of grandeur or sublimity, then we find most of the romantic poems, they are lyrical, lyric poems, as I told you in my just now. So, what is lyrical poem or lyric poem? Lyric poem is a descriptive poem containing a single emotion or thought of the poet. It is a descriptive poem which is subjective, and containing the single form of emotion of the poet. Because when you watch a movie, you find lyrics. You find lyric because when you watch the song in the movie, each song is containing a single emotion. If it is a love song, totally the song is love. If it is a sad song, totally sad. If the song is patriotic, totally patriotic. If it is a celebrating one, then totally a poem of joy and celebration. You don't find the mixture. So lyric there, that is where the composers of those songs are called lyricists. So lyric poem is subjective poem. It is individualistic, and it contains a single thought or single emotion, and it is a narrative poem. So because this kind of poem that preferred that's suited to the romantic imagination, then you find that obviously it is a reaction to the classical age or classical poetry that is the against the scientific rationalization of nature to the Augustan age. So it is not the scientific rationalization of nature. It is a kind of emotional treatment of nature, totally contrast to the Augustan age, and it was embodied most strongly in the visual art, music, and finally on literature. So this is just a small background to the definition of romanticism. Now, as someone was asking me about the silent features of romantic poetry, that let us have a focus on that salient features of romantic poetry. So we have discussed, I have already given you certain points on the salient features. Still, in a nutshell, I must say that romantic poetry is opposed to the neoclassical poetry or the Augustan poetry, or what we say, the restoration poetry, that is its predecessors. Because neoclassical poetry or Augustan poetry is an imitation, something equated from the society. So it was an imitation, copy of the society, of course, through the intellectual observation. So neoclassical poetry is intellectual, as I told you. And neoclassical theory of poetry is based on the point that it is very important. The function of poetry, the neoclassical theory, the function of poetry is to instruct and please. Instruct and please. It should be instructive, to give knowledge, and it should please. It should give pleasure. But when you come to romantic poetry, the romantic poetry is to get solace from the solitariness, from the melancholic situations. So romantic poetry is not for instruction or pleasure, Romantic poetry is to derive, it derived such a mystical or philosophical value from different activities of nature, different situations of nature, through the through the evaluation of mind by the role of imagination. How it is there, we shall find it. And neoclassical theory says that art is a mirror reflection of the society, truthful reflection of the society, mirror reflection of the society. But romantic poetry does not reflect society, it reflects the creation of nature for the support of mankind, or nature and its role for the overall benefit of mankind, that is psychological, spiritual, mystical benefit of mankind. And in classical poetry, the primary subject is man, means society, and the secondary subject is again the wit or the intelligence. But in romantic poetry, the primary subject is nature, and the secondary subject is man, and that is why it is emotional. So in that kind of a contrast and language diction that I told you in my earlier discussion, now I will typically give you some of the salient features of romanticism. That romantic theory says that source of poetry, the first point is that the source of poetry is the poet himself. The source of poetry is the poet himself, not the imitation of the society. So poetry is a self-creation through imagination. So it is self-creation through imagination. That is where the pioneer of the age, William Wordsworth, he says that poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Poetry I discussed in the first class, introductory class, that what is poetry? Poetry is the art of writing a poem. So the art of writing a poem is, according to Wordsworth, spontaneous overflow, automatic, spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, not ordinary feelings. So source of poetry is always the poet himself, not the copy of society, imitation of society, as it was by the Augustan poets. And the second point is that poetry comes from inspiration, vision, and prophecy. Poetry comes from inspiration. So who will inspire? Inspiration from the surrounding. Inspiration from the surrounding. And this surrounding is a creation of divinity. It is a creation of God. So there is spiritual element, mystical element, and they create inspiration in the mind of the poet. So poetry comes from inspiration, vision, and always the romantic poets are prophetic. They're prophetic. They see, they anticipate for an ideal world, because that was the demand of the time after the chaotic situation occurred in the society after French Revolution. So because the French people witnessed that the call of liberty, equality, and fraternity, what they sought for, was shattered. The French society became chaotic, totally disordered. So French Revolution was a successful one in the sense that the monarchy was abolished, but it was not really successful in the true sense of the term, because they could not continue with liberty, equality, and fraternity. Rather, French society became extremely chaotic. So when you talk about that question of the form of the style of inspiration, vision, and prophecy, we find William Black may be considered as the first romantic poet, because his poems were based on this idea of inspiration, vision, and prophecy. Vision and prophecy. So the next point will be that romantic poetry was a daring innovation of themes, forms, language, and style. They had an exclusive innovation, daring innovation, new innovation of the themes, subject matter of the poem, the forms of the poem, and the language of the poem, even the style of the poem. They are unique of their own form, own theme, selection of theme.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
One second, please. Third point.
Third point.
Uh,
Third point was that poetry comes from inspiration, vision, and prophecy. Inspiration, vision, and
the daring innovation. What?
oh, daring innovation of themes,
Yes.
themes, themes, forms, language, and style. That is where one of the romantic poets, John Keats, says that poetry comes to the skill of writing poem comes to the mind of a poet as naturally as the leaves of a tree. As the new leaves or the leaves come to the tree, similarly, poetic inspiration come to the mind of a poet naturally. So it is self-creation and it is the inspiration, it is the vision, and their poem is always prophetic because at the concluding section of the poem, they think for, they seek for an ideal world because that was the target of the romantic poets because they had rejected society to nature for the solace in the life. Then the next point is their fascination for solitary figures and because they were social nonconformists. Their fascination for interest for solitary figures. Solitary means lonely, aloofness. So for every romantic poet, aloofness is a necessity. How can you be solitary? How can you be lonely? So when you escape the society, when you escape the real world, can you migrate to the romantic world of your imagination? And during the poet's stay at the world of imagination, obviously not for all time to come, for some time, he achieves the height of poetic inspiration when he writes the poem. Because let me say you a very simple thing that when someone is totally engrossed or involved in the world of imagination, then his mind is present there in the romantic world. His body may be present in this world, but his mind is totally, I mean, his mind has traveled or migrated to the world of imagination. And he is so involved, so engrossed in that world of imagination that he a time comes that he entirely forgets this real world. But how long, suppose you are sitting on a chair and you are thinking something, and a time comes, then you become oblivious of the situation where you are there because your mind is completely 100% involved in the world of imagination. So that kind
Sir,
of a
we can say that it is like catastrophic.
catastrophic is something different. Catastrophic means it is devastating. But migration. Sometimes what happens? Sometimes we are sitting in our room alone and we are thinking about something, and a time comes we totally get oblivious of the present situation because our mind is totally involved there. So it is a total migration to the world of imagination. But is it permanent? Never, because you cannot remain in the world of imagination for all time to come. You have to come. That is why I told you it is transitory. It is momentary because you have to come back. A disturbance will take place or a saturation point will be there. Your mind will come back to the world of reality. You will be okay, then you will be conscious of your present world. So the time in which or a period, a small period in which you are there in the world of imagination, if you are a poet, if you are having the higher quality of feelings, then you can write down a poem of that experience. And that is the subject matter of romantic poetry. Wordsworth has a different type of treatment. Keats has a different type of treatment. Shelley has different. Coleridge has different. Byron has different. So their role is one. Imagination. That is why they come under the fold of romantic poetry. But the treatment of nature, treatment of imagination is different by the different poets. So the solitariness is necessary. So when will be, you see, when I talk about the word lonely, lonely means when I am lonely. Lonely means not a positive term for us, for the ordinary people, because lonely is not a positive word. When I feel lonely means I'm not feeling okay. Lonely is not a kind of, I mean, emotional contentment. But when the romantic poets do not use the word lonely, they use the word solitary. Solitary may be identical with lonely, but in meaning it is different. Solitary means you will derive the pleasure of your loneliness, the derivation of pleasure in the momentary situation of loneliness. That is solitary. Bliss, what Wordsworth called bliss of solitude. BLISS, bliss, blessings, bliss of solitude. The solitude is a bliss. Solitude is a blessings for the romantic people. And the common word of solitude is loneliness. But loneliness is never a bliss for the common man like you and me. Because when you are left alone, when you are left lonely, you will never feel, I mean, you will never feel good. So that is the function of solitariness. That is essential, because the solitariness will the create a kind of imagination in the mind to migrate to the world of romanticism for certain time. So why that? Because they left the society, they escaped the society, and that because they were social non-conformist. Non-conformist means who do not obey or do not conform. Conform, obey, abide by. They do not conform, they do not obey, they do not abide by the traditional go of the period. That was the social go of the period. And what is their subject matter? The subject matter is the idealization of rural life. Because the Augustan poetry was concentrating on urban life, town life, the romantic people were concentrating on the rural life, and they idealized it. They projected it as in the form of idealization. They made it ideal. So rustic people, the village people, they are the subject matter in most of the romantic poems, because rustic people are the village people are the common people of the village. They have a very close proximity with nature. They have a close contact with nature. So these are some of the features of salient features of romantic poetry. Any doubt? Then ask, then I shall be proceeding them. If there is any doubt, you can ask. Okay? Any doubt by anybody?
Sir, what is the
Okay.
exact meaning of salient?
Salient features, fundamental features. Salient, SALIENT, fundamental features.
Sir, the poetry is spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Can you say it again?
Okay. Do you want the explanation of it?
No, just say that line again.
Okay. Spontaneous overflow. Just wait a minute. I am giving you a page number of your book 6. That is page 6. The page number is page number is 18, 1-8. Okay. So page number is 18 of book 6. 18 book 6. If you get
Okay.
it, got it?
Yeah, I got page 18. Yeah,
Okay.
got it.
Okay.
Got it.
So in the third paragraph, you see, it is written there, poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, semicolon. It takes its origin from emotion recollected in tranquility, semicolon. The emotion is contemplated till by a series of reactions, the tranquility gradually disappears and an emotion indeed to that which was before the subject of contemplation. So our point is, our focus is on the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Have you read any poem of Wordsworth that is either Daffodil or Solitary Reaper? Have you read Daffodil or Solitary Reaper? If not, then I will explain. Yes or no?
So some Wordsworth poetry I read in my UG.
Okay, okay,
No,
no
sir.
problem. So let me see. Let me
Nature
say.
poem.
Hmm. So when we talk about Solitary Reaper, okay. So what is happening is, just I'm giving the subject, and I will explain that spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. What is happening? Somewhere, someday, some days back, long days back, Wordsworth had visited to the island of Scotland. So when he was passing through the island of Scotland, he came across a peasant girl cutting the corn and singing a song. And from the tone of the song, the poet could not understand the language of this song, Scottish language, but he could feel that the tone of this song was a melancholy song, sad song. So the poet anticipated that where the girl, the young girl, the island lass, LASH less means a young girl, unmarried girl, why that unmarried girl is singing a melancholy song. Maybe some, mm, unfortunate events might have occurred to her. Her lover might have been dead in the battle, her father might have been dead, or some unfortunate event might have been taken place. So many speculations he has made. Now, he had forgotten that solitary girl. He has forgotten that solitary reaper. The reaper means the pigeon girl cutting the song, reaping the corn. So after 10, 20 or 25 or 30 years after that
Sir, hello.
event, okay,
Sir, sir, you are
yes,
referring book MET 6 na?
6 and 7 both combined. Okay.
Achha, okay.
So when he recalled that event after once in a lonely time, what's a solitary moment of his life, all of a sudden, when I was thinking about the past, he suddenly that solitary girl came into his mind. And his mind gradually traveled or migrated to that event in the imaginary level, and he could attain that past in the present by traveling to the world, by traveling to that event through the world of imagination. Now, at a certain stage of his mind, the spontaneously, because he was a poet, there was an overflow of powerful feelings. So when that powerful feelings overflew in his mind, he translated that emotion, subjective emotion, into the form of writing, and that became the poetry. And in the poetry, in the art, after 30 years, that solitary girl who might have really been turned into an old lady, that girl is still young. So how the past is reliving in the present through the power of imagination of a poet, because a poet is superior to an ordinary man because he has the powerful, spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. And the powerful feelings spontaneously overflow in the mind of the poet through imagination or through recollection. So it is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Okay, it takes its origin from emotion recollected in tranquility. What is recollection? Recollected means to remember the past. So Wordsworth remembered the past through imagination. So remaining in the present, he travels back to the past and he brings the past to the present through imagination. And when this mind is inspired at a certain point of time, the mind is translating that recollection through the powerful feelings into the form of art, that is poetry. And in that poetry, even after 300 years today, we find the Scotland girl still a young girl. So art is more permanent. Art is more permanent than reality because of the power of imagination. That is the theory of Wordsworth. So this is just an example of that solitary reaper. The poem. The poem is a bright example of his poetic theory. A spontaneous poetry is the source. The style of writing a poem is poet is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings when emotions are recollected in tranquility. So you go from the reverse side. First, what will happen? Tranquility. A tranquil atmosphere will come. Peaceful atmosphere will come. In that peaceful atmosphere, what will happen? Recollection will take place. Past memory will relive in your mind. How? Through your imagination. Imagination recollected in tranquility. So that emotions will go on recollecting, go on recollecting, go on recollecting, and it will attend to a certain stage. In that stage, the idea will overflow spontaneously, automatically in the mind of a poet. Why? Because a poet is a um, having the powerful feelings. You and I, even if we imagine, even if we recollect, we cannot make these powerful feelings translated into the form of word because you are not the poets. So that poet will translate that feeling as a feeling. So it is the spontaneous overflow. Spontaneous overflow will be there, and that art will make the reality permanent. That is the power of imagination, according to Wordsworth. That was the meaning of spontaneous overflow or powerful feelings. Is it clear? Is it clear? Because
Yes, sir.
because
Very clear.
Wordsworth has made it clear in his preface to lyrical ballads. He has made clear the poetic theory, that is in 1800 when he added a preface to the lyrical ballads after the demand made by the readers of that lyrical ballads, which was first published in 1798. So he added that preface or introduction to narrate the poetic theory. So we discussed something on that. So when you come to that romantic period, then some of the early romantic poets whom you will find in your book 6, the early as I told you that in the true sense of the term, we can say William Black. William Black is the first romantic poet. We can take him. And prior to William Black, Thomas Gray has introduced the idea of romanticism by democratizing the. Please mute the microphone, or if you want to ask something, then please ask. Okay, so the early romantics are James Thomson from 1700 to 1748, and Thomas Gray, as I told you, from 1716 to 71. It is there in the book 6. And William Cowper, 1731 to 1800, and Robert Burns from 1759 to 1796. So, particularly in the true sense of the term, these are the minor poets. They wrote some nature poems through the power of imagination, but they are just the beginners. But the first romantic,
Sir, Thompson and Wordsworth both writes about nature. Sir,
yes.
There's a question like draw a comparison between the poets of romantic poets. Draw a comparison between romantic poets in their themes and style.
Yes.
Sir, how the poets are different in style? They both wrote about same thing, nature.
We shall discuss that. I will be coming to the major poets. Okay. When we shall come major poets, we shall discuss that. So, in the true sense of the term, we can find that William Black from 1700. Yes.
Sir, please repeat the poet's name again.
One is James Thomson from 1700 to 1748. Then Thomas Gray from 1716 to 71. Elegy written in country churchyard, as I have already referred. Then William Cowper, Cowper, William Cowper from 1731 to 1800. Then Robert Burns, 1759 to 1796. His famous poem is "My Love is Like a Red, Red Rose." So these poets, they had a very common theme. That is they wrote about the divinity of nature, like Wordsworth, divinity of the spiritual, mystical aspect of nature. But when you come to William Black from Black, William Black from 1757 to 1827, he had a collection of two collections of poems. The first collection is Songs of Innocence And the second collection is Songs of Experience, Songs of Innocence, Songs of Experience. If you refer to your book 6, page number 29 to 44, book 6, page number 29 to 44, it covers some of the major poems of William Blake as the beginner of Romantic poetry from the two collections of poems, that is Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience. And in all the poems you'll find from page number 29 to 44, you'll find that is most of the poems of William Blake, they are didactic poems. Didactic means ethics, moralistic poem. They are based on some didactic principles of life, ethics of life, or the morals of life through the observation of nature. Because one of the Blake's view, you find in page number 30, Blake's views on Christianity. That what is Blake's view on Christianity? That he has a revaluation of Christian values. Because after the French Revolution, there was a revaluation of Christian values. Revaluation, the Christian, because already a Protestant spirit had come to the society. So the revaluation of Christian values was very much didactically approached through the nature poems of William Blake. So his poems are allegorical, analogical, literal, as well as moral. Because in page number 34, you'll find the technique of Blake's poetry. Page number 33, you'll find the techniques of Blake's poetry in the last but one paragraph. It is very clearly written how his poems are literally, morally, allegorically, and analogically very important to revalue the Christian theology or Christian experience. Because just I bring to your notice one of the poems, some lines of the poems from the Songs of Innocence. There is a poem. Yes. Yes. Yes, please repeat. What is your question?
Mention that
page number 33. 33, book 6. Okay. So please mute your microphone. Book 6.
Okay.
So okay, please mute. So from Songs of Innocence, in page number 35, there is a stanza. You see, very interesting. Little lamb is addressing to a lamb. So, little lamb, who made thee? Who made you? Dost thou know who made thee? Gave thee life and beat the feet by the stream and over the mead. So everything is referring to the God. That the nature is made by God, the lamb is made by God, and how the didactic element is there, that God has planned everything for us. So this lamb, why the poet is addressing the poem to a lamb? Because if you see the last two lines of the poem, the little lamb, God bless thee, little lamb, God bless thee. But before that two lines, there is also line, I a child and thou a lamb. We are called by this name. So what is the similarity between the lamb, between the child, and between that I? Because there is, you see, when you go to a lamb, the lamb is going to a sheep. So when that lamb is going to a sheep, then you find there is almost every year, the sheep is being the wool of the sheep is being collected. So there is a rejuvenation of life taking place with that lamb or with the sheep by collecting its wool each and every year. Similarly, when that child is saying, I am a child, then why this child? Because this child is, because during that time you find, who is this child? The child is The child, the child, they go through a tonsure. Tonsure, no, tonsure means the clean shaving of your head for the religious purpose. When our father or mother dies, the male people in our society, they make their head clean shaven. So that is called tonsure, Tonsure, tonsure. So the child is being tonsured in that religious background, and this tonsure means it is a kind of cleanliness. It is a kind of rebirth of the child, as in the Brahmin society find the rebirth of the child in that Bratopananam. So for the tonsure, so tonsure is a kind of cultural requirement for the child for the awareness or for a kind of resurrection. So similarly, Jesus Christ, it is believed that after the death, crucifixion, Jesus Christ came to life for a certain time to give advice to his disciples, close disciples, as well Easter is celebrated, and we call it the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So here the image, it is allegorical. The lamb, because Jesus Christ was a shepherd, the lamb, the child, and the Christ, they are very much identical in the form of reorientation of life, or that is the resurrection of life, for three different points. Because in the Songs of Innocence, another poem is there in page number 36, chimney sweeper. So who are the chimney sweeper? The chimney sweeper is again referred to because in England during that time, the chimney which were attached to the hearth of the kitchen, the diameter of the chimney was such that in every periodical time or every gap of time, the chimney was to be cleaned. So when the chimney was to be cleaned, the diameter was so small that a grown-up man cannot enter into the chimney. So usually, small boys were recruited to clean chimney. They are called chimney sweepers. So those boys to enter the chimney to get themselves rid from the suffocation, they were getting themselves tonsured, clean. They will be totally clean shaved, and they will enter the chimney and they will clean it through the piece of cotton and all that. The chimney sweepers, these boys, how they are, and when they come out of the chimney, they are totally black because of the soot, SOT soot of the chimney. So these chimneys who are there, they are usually the poor boys. So they are employed in that work, the chimney sweepers. So black. So what is this chimney? The chimney is the mark of the industrial civilization. And in that industrial civilization, how that innocent child, the child accepts it without any protest to the condition because he is poor. So that chimney sweeper who work as the chimney sweepers, the children are innocent and meek like lambs. They are innocent, meek like lamb. So here the images are, but I will not go into detail of the poem because we shall not have time. So in the Songs of Innocence or Songs of Experience, from page number 29 to 44, you'll find a lot of romantic elements that is there through the didactic approach to the ethical approach of romantic poetry. So William Black in some way is the beginner of romantic poetry, and but now after that group, the beginners, we shall jump to the major poets of that period. And as you know, I have already referred that the pioneer of the age was William Wordsworth. William Wordsworth from 1770 to 1850. So, as we know, that publication of lyrical ballads or preface to lyrical ballads in 1800 was considered to be the beginning of Romantic movement in England. And Wordsworth was the pioneer. He was the, exponent, you may say, of the Romantic poetry by laying down some grudging principles of the new movement in his preface to lyrical ballads in 1800. And in his most famous poem, the Preludes, written in 1850, he very much subtitles it as the growth of a poet's mind. So it is written in the epic style, but it is the mature poem of Wordsworth is truly spiritually autobiographical. So in that particular series of poems, he had reflected the tremendous influence of nature on him for shaping his personality. So he has treated nature as his friend, as his philosopher, as his guide, and nature has the administrative capability to shape and develop his personality into a greater human being. That in the first two books, Prelude 1 and Prelude 2, we find here the early childhood of Wordsworth is very much described. And he is here describing his communion with nature, interaction with nature in an innocent way. Because before that prelude, if you go to another important poem of Wordsworth, that is Tintern Abbey. Tintern Abbey is a place where Wordsworth has visited for 3 times. And in his 3 visits, first visit is when he was a child, a boy. Second visit when he was a growing young man. And third visit was that when he was totally matured, an adult. So in his 3 visits, how he is interacting with nature in 3 different ways. In the childhood, when he visited that place, that it was his sensuous interaction, physical interaction, the animalistic passion, the ordinary passion. He was not able to see the broader aspect of nature because of the immaturity of his mind. But when he visits for the second time, he could feel the moral influence of nature on his growing personality. And when his third visit he goes to Tintern Abbey, he could find the mystical concern of nature, the spiritual concern of nature. Because when the romantic poets are escapists, they escaped society to nature, then what was particularly Wordsworth's treatment of nature? Because the treatment of nature of Wordsworth is mystic, spiritual, and he calls it pantheism, pantheistic philosophy of Wordsworth. Pantheistic, pantheistic. In an ordinary sense, we call it paganistic philosophy. Pagan, you understand? Pagan means worship of nature, paganism. Because before the creation of any religion, man was worshipping nature, every object of nature. So Wordsworth, in a very simple language, Wordsworth is the worshipper of nature. Worship. So when you worship something, then when you worship nature, then it is obviously a mystical or spiritual treatment to nature. You see, sometimes we are also mystical, sometimes we are also spiritual, sometimes we are also paganistic, sometimes we are also pantheistic towards nature. When a Hindu worships a tulsi plant or a banyan tree, then why does he or she worships that? Because he has some belief on this tree, believing on some principles. So we worship because we have some spiritual attachment to it. Let us say, when you put a piece of stone in the temple, you build some nose and eyes and tongue and give some vermilion on it, give some flowers, and you say that it becomes a deity. So if someone asks you to prove that, is there any spiritual power? It cannot. So it is your surrender, it is your belief. So what is worship? Worship is a kind of belief. It is a kind of surrender. So Wordsworth believes that nature is a manifestation of God. So in every object of nature, God's presence can be felt. But you should have that spiritual quality. You should have that, pantheistic quality. So in a nutshell, I will tell you, I explained the poetic theory of Wordsworth, but I may say that Wordsworth treatment of nature, Wordsworth imagination that I told you, spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Then what is Wordsworth treatment of nature? Wordsworth treatment of nature is pantheistic, that is mystic or spiritual. Okay, so mysticism, pantheism, spiritualism, or it is escapism, whatever say. In Tintor Navy, you go to Tintor Navy, you go to the Lucy poems, you go to the imitations of immortality, you go to the excursion, you go to the immortality ode, you go to ode on an imitation of immortality, or you go to Tintor Navy, or you go to preludes. Everywhere you will find the mystic treatment of nature, the spiritual treatment of nature, the pantheistic treatment of nature of Wordsworth is there. So these are some of the, and the poetic diction of Wordsworth. As I have already told you, that the poetic diction of the Romantic poets are very simple. And in case of Wordsworth, it is a selection of language really used by men. So speech of the ordinary people is considered as the poetic diction of Wordsworth in the earlier generation of his poems. And the moral justification of poetry, as Wordsworth believes that poetry has a moral justification. What is that? A poet provides us with spiritual exercises in order to give us new feelings and make our feelings more sane and more pure. Because poetry for Wordsworth is a source of solace, and it is to pure our mind. It has to refine our mind. It is to make us sane. S-A-N is sane. It is to make us more pure and pure. So that is Wordsworth. According to Wordsworth, poetry has a moral justification. So when you discuss Wordsworth, you must not forget his poetic theory. You must not forget his theory of mysticism or pantheism and use of language, that is simple language, the rustic people, language used by common man, and poetry has a moral justification, moral power on us. These are some of the points for Wordsworth. But when you come to the next poet, that is S.T. Coleridge, from 1772 to 1834, if you can get Coleridge in your page number 20 of book 6. Okay, so Coleridge is famous for having a different kind of romantic theory. Someone was asking me what was the difference between that. So I discussed Wordsworth, some points of his theory and treatment of poetry. When I come to Coleridge, then Coleridge's famous book is Biographia Literaria. As lyrical ballads are the combination of these two poets, and preface is purely of Wordsworth to describe poetic theory. So when you come to Biographia Literaria, published in 1817, that Biographia Literaria, it analyzes the poetic theory of S.T. Coleridge. Because S.T. Coleridge's romantic idea is based on supernaturalism. Supernaturalism means something unbelievable, something ghostly element. Supernaturalism and some ghostly element. So usually supernaturalism or something unbelievable beyond the reality, how that is to be treated for the sake of art. Okay, and he uses a term for the purpose of this, what he calls as, please remember it, what he calls as, that is willing suspension of disbelief. Willing suspension of disbelief. So what is that? Willing suspension of disbelief. Okay, it is a term used by Coleridge in his Biographia Literaria. Willing suspension of disbelief means willingly, voluntarily, or intentionally, you have to suspend, cancel your disbelief. Means what is not believable, what is to disbelieve, you have to cancel it and you have to accept it. Let me give you an example of his most famous poem, Rime of the Ancient Mariner. In that particular poem, Rime of the Ancient Mariner, a mariner is going through with his crew in the ocean of Atlantic, and they were guided by an albatross. Albatross is a sea bird. So when they lost the way, and an albatross flew in front of their boat or ship, and they followed that bird. A time came that they were irritated with the bird, and the mariner killed the bird. But after he killed the bird, the weather changed. nature became violent because nature is a living force. It took its revenge. So again the ship lost its way. All the comrades or all the crew members died, and the mariner could repent for his mistake. Then he took the dead body of the bird and he tied it with a rope and put it on the neck as a sense of repentance. Now, the story goes on and all that. So for months together, the bird is being hung on his neck with a piece of rope. So if you are sensible enough, if you are scientifically aware, then you will ask a question that how can the bird be hung on your neck for months together? The bird will perish, the bird will get rot. It will bring out smell. But for the sake of artistic pleasure, you have to cancel this disbelief and you have to believe that the bird is as it is, the bird is intact. So this acceptance of the reader of a disbelievable thing by willingly suspending the idea is an example of willing suspension of disbelief. So in the use of supernatural element, use of ghostly element in the poem, the willing suspension of disbelief has to be played by the readers, or it has to be followed by the poet for the sake of artistic target. That is one point that is describing in the Biographia Literaria. And if you practice that, then the role of imagination can have some artistic influence in the mind of the readers. Then in Warsaw, you find there is you see the difference, that imagination in case of Warsaw is a recollection. Past will be recollected, remembered, relived. But in case of Coleridge, he divides the imagination into two categories. One he called fancy, and another is called imagination. So for Coleridge, there are two types of imagination. One is fancy, another is imagination. And again in imagination, there are two types of imaginations: primary imagination and secondary imagination. So what is that fancy? Fancy is the aggregative and associative power which generates to a mode of memory emancipated from the order of mind and space. It is just a recollection only. If I remember a single day or a day of my school days, then it is just a fancy. What Wordsworth did, Wordsworth remembered that, but because of the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, he could present that memory in the form of art, translated in the form of a poem, and that was his greatness. But Coleridge rejects it. He says recollection or recollecting the past or recollecting something, remembering the past is not a matter of creativity, because you are remembering something which was real and you just write it in the form of a poem. Then what is important? Important is not recollection. Recollection is just a fancy, an ordinary form of recalling the past. Imagination is more important. Imagination means it is a creative art. You will innovate, you will generate, you will create, not recreate, you will create. So when you will create, it has two steps. One is primary imagination, another is secondary imagination. So what is that primary imagination? Primary imagination is that the organs of common perception through the senses, and it is a kind of wit to use metaphors and similes. Through your ordinary senses, through your eyes, through your nose, through your ear, what you hear, what you see, what you observe, through your ordinary senses, you think of something, you make idea of something, you create something. Your potential of creativity generates something. But that everyone can generate it. Everybody can think, everybody can imagine. Every individual who's having a sane mind or proper mind, he or she can imagine. But a poet has been blessed with the secondary imagination, because secondary imagination is a poetic vision. It is a higher kind of creative power, and by this creative power, the poet can idealize the moment into the form of an artistic extraordinariness. So recollection for him has nothing to do. It is considered as an ordinary thing. The imagination for this primary purpose, you just imagine and you forget. That is primary imagination. But when you imagine and you create and you record it through your poetic capability, then it is because of your poetic vision. It is because of your poetic extraordinariness. So secondary imagination mediates between a man and the nature. So as because they are the nature poets, because of the power of secondary imagination, the mind mediates. It is a mediation. The mind mediates between the man and the nature, and it indicates the organic unity of the universe. Through the secondary imagination, through the mind can make an organic connection, organic unity with the universe. Universe means here the nature that in which the poet is available there. That is why Coleridge's poem is different from Wordsworth, because there is no recollection in his poems. Rather, there is creation through secondary imagination, and he does not take the ordinary objects. Wordsworth takes daffodil. Wordsworth takes the Highland Girl, or Wordsworth takes the ordinary memory of his the incidents that has taken place in the life and how nature has the impacts on him. But in case of Coleridge, we find the remote aspects of nature that he takes. Remote
Sir,
aspects of
there's
nature.
a saying like Wordsworth makes supernatural things natural, and Coleridge make
Natural things,
no,
supernatural.
Wordsworth made natural things supernatural, and Coleridge
Yeah.
makes supernatural things natural.
Yes, just the opposite. Okay. So Coleridge deals with remote aspects of nature, and he is remembered for particularly three of his important poems. That is the Unseen Mariner, which is a ballad poem, a story in the form of verse that I told you how willing suspension of disbelief is very much there. And another poem is Kubla Khan, it is a vision poem, Kubla Khan, and Christabel, medieval poem of medieval atmosphere. And all these poems, they arise from the world of dreams and subconscious. So when you make a comparison between Wordsworth and Coleridge, you find these differences. They are both dealing with the nature, but some different aspects. They are both dealing with imagination, but with different aspects. Similarly, when you come to the third poet, there is Shelley, P.B. Shelley. P.B. Shelley, whom you can find in book number 7 from page 11 to 51. P.B. Shelley, Percy Bysshe Shelley, the life period is from 1792 to 1822. He has also very much made clear of his poetic theory in his essay Defense of Poetry. Defense of Poetry, you can get it in page number 23 of book 6. In Defense of Poetry, what do we find the poems of the role of imagination and the treatment of nature by Shelley? That Shelley's idea is, he had a realistic idea. I mean, he did not have that pantheism, or did not have the spiritual, or did not have all that primary or secondary imagination. But very specifically, Shelley is a realist. Shelley is an idealist. Idealist. He was a poet of prophecy and vision. So because he was an idealist, Adarsvadi idealist, he was a poet of prophecy. He could anticipate prophecy of vision against the tyranny and suffering of mankind. So because that was a time after the French Revolution when tyranny and suffering was going on in the society, he was anticipating for it. He was thinking for it. He was expecting for a prophetic vision of an ideal society. So he treats nature as an outward manifestation of divine beauty. So how can man derive pleasure? How can man think of an ideal society? He thinks man can go for an ideal society by taking inspiration from the divine beauty of nature, because nature is a divine manifestation. But you see, unlike Wordsworth, he never worships it. Rather, he appreciates it. So he appreciates but it never worships it. Natural phenomenon, natural phenomenon happening in the nature become the symbolic factors to influence the mankind. Symbol, he uses a lot of symbols of natural objects. Natural objects, natural phenomena as a divine beauty become the symbolic factor in the poem to motivate the mankind, to motivate man for anticipating, for thinking, or for the aspiring of an ideal society. And unlike like Wordsworth and Coleridge, he also emphasizes on the role of imagination, the role of creative imagination, by thinking that artist means he includes all. He includes a painter. He
Sir,
includes.
till now,
Hmm.
this romantic age, do we discuss about any poet who is female or
No, female poet is not there because you see there
okay?
is no rise of feminism. Okay, so after 18th century Victorian age, you will find some sort of female poets or writers. So this time that was not there. Okay, so he considers artist. Artist means he does not only include the poet. He includes philosophers. He includes painters. He includes all artists. But artists for him are superior beings. So a poet is also a superior being. A poet has a definitely better vision than the society, and nature and natural phenomenon are the divine beauty for him. So all natural phenomena that he observes through the power of imagination, they becoming the symbolic representation to inspire men to go for a better vision. So in the end of the poem, in all of the poem, you will find that the poet is optimistic, hopeful, because the poet ends the poem with a prophetic vision. In the poems like Prometheus Unbound, Ode to West Wind, or Ode to West Wind, or Adonais, a poem, an elegy written on the death of his friend John Keats, because John Keats died very young at the age of 26. Then Ode to Skylark. So these poems are highly emotional, and where he begins the poem with a rhapsodizing tone. Rhapsodizing means from the very beginning there is a speed. From the very beginning there is a speed, rhapsodizing quality. That we call Shelley's Rhapsody, Rhapsody, Rhapsody. So from the very beginning, a violent movement is being introduced. So rhapsodizing trend and argumentative humor, a lot of arguments, and the poems, they express of the highest emotional ecstasy, highest emotional mood, highest cheerfulness, highest joy from the divine inspiration of nature. And of course, each poems are the symbolic representations of divine manifestation to inspire the mankind for an ideal society. So P.B. Shelley loves to roam through space and infinity. The time that he incorporates in the poem, that is the time not for a transitoriness, for all time to come. And he, from the very beginning, there is an instantaneous effect and a powerful imagination they are lying in his poem. Because I will quote a line from his famous poem, Ode to West Wind. The poem ends with a line like this: "If winter comes, can spring be far behind? Question mark. If winter comes, can spring be far behind? I mean, if there is suffering, if there is tyranny, winter, then after that, spring is there. So this spring, the inclusion of spring, is a prophetic vision of the poet. So the winter, the presentation of nature in the winter is the symbolic representation of suffering. Okay, because winter is also a divine manifestation, and in the divine manifestation, if winter will not be there, spring will never come. So spring, when spring is representing our the pleasure of life, the aspiration of life, the joy of life. So this spring is not possible when there is no winter. So when Wordsworth and Coleridge, they only touch upon the joyous side of nature, Shelley touches both the positive and negative aspects of nature. So this presentation of Shelley is both positive and negative, but at the end, he exercises a prophetic vision against the tyranny and suffering. And when you come to another young poet of the age, that is John Keats, a very short life period from 1795 to 1821, just 26 years. But within these 26 years, he has written 300 letters, because Keats' letters are very important. In the letters, he has, as we find the Literaria Biographia, defense of poetry or defense of poetry, or we find the lyrical ballads, or we find in case of Coleridge the Biographia Literaria. Similarly, Keats' poetic theory can be explained through his letters. 300 letters he has written to different people of his time, different men of literature of his time. And in those 300 letters, he has explained what is the theory of his poetry. He also bases his poem on imagination, but as we like the willing suspension of disbelief in Coleridge, similarly in John Keats, we'll find a technical term that is called negative capability. So what is that negative capability? That you will find in your 74 number page of book 6. But let me explain you what is that negative capability. Negative capability means to negate your capability.
Sir, book 6 or book 7?
6, page 74. So to negate your capability, I'm giving a very burning example. Suppose you are sitting in your room, and you are looking through the window outside. So when you look to a scenery outside through the window, then at the very beginning of your vision, the grill of the window becomes the obstacle. In between your eye and the scenery outside, the grill or the rod that is in the window, that will remain in between. But if you are continuously watching that scenery outside for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and you are completely observed in that scenery, a time will come, you will attain a situation when you will not feel the obstacle of that railing or that grill in your window. I mean, you are completely able to negate that grill or roll in the window, because your mind has completely been absorbed in the beauty or in the scenery outside. Similarly, when a poet imagines, according to Keats, when a poet imagines, then when he is completely lost in the world of imagination, he roams in the world of imagination, then he attains such a moment that in that moment he completely negates or forgets, or he becomes oblivious of his presence in this physical world. He 100% makes a journey and stage in that imaginary world, and he attains that for some time, momentary, because after some time he has to come back. And in most of the kids, we must not forget that we may call it a negative habit or bad habit or a good habit, that Keats was an addict of opium, and wine. Because of that, he suffered from tuberculosis by the excessive use of opium and wine, and he died at the age of 26. Because by that time, tuberculosis was a fatal disease. So he was taking a particular kind of wine that was vintage. Vintage. The name of the wine was vintage. So in most of the time, by remaining in the world of intoxication, he was getting the pleasure of elation, what we call matwala in Hindi, matwala, elation. So remaining in the world of elation through the intoxicating effect of opium and wine. And in that stage, his mind was roaming in the world of imagination, and he was so a genius that he could write poems in that stage. So Keats, and at that stage, he was attaining a state of negating his capability. I mean, the physical world was totally forgotten, and he was attending that. And because he was attending that, then he in most of the poem, Keats has a very, I mean, exclusive technique, or that is his explanation of beauty was sensuous. He was writing the poems, or he was treating nature through senses. We have 5 senses, and all the 5 senses. For example, when he is beginning his poem, The Eve of Saint Agnes. The beginning line is the line is uh, Eve of Saint Agnes Eve. Ah, chill it is. So when he is writing the word, ah, chill it is giving a kind of impact to your skin, because a reader could feel as if his skin is feeling the chill of winter. Ah, chill it is. That chill it is a sensory effect to the skin of the readers. So his narration of the poem is always appealing to our five senses, and his imageries, his beauty of the poem was very rich and suggestive. By richly, and language of kids is totally different from language of Wordsworth, because his language was very ornamental language, not at all the simple language, ornamental language. And he 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 takes the subject matter of the melancholic subject matter. Melancholy dwells with the beauty of nature. Melancholy means sadness. So while describing the nature, there is a melancholy, because he says in one of the famous poems, that is Endymion, written in 1818. Endymion, because his poems are his important poems are like Endymion, Hyperion, Eve of Saint Agnes, Poetry of Earth, La Bella Dame Sans Mercy, and very famous six odes: Ode to Nightingale, Ode to Grecian Orn, Ode to Psyche, Ode to Melancholy, Ode to Autumn, Ode to Indolence. So in one of his famous poems, that is Endymion, he has very clearly stated that our sweetest songs are those which tell our saddest thought. Our sweetest songs are those which tell our saddest thought. So to make the song sweetest, to make the song appealing, Keats always touches upon the melancholic aspect of nature. The melancholic aspect of nature, and he has intense love for nature, and at the same time the mythical worship of mighty beings of nature, the mythical worship of the mighty beings in nature. So you take the poem Hyperion, you take the poem Endymion, you take the poem Eve of Saint Agnes. He has selected some important beings, but he has treated them with the beauty of nature in such a way that the poems are not mythical, that the poems appear to be natural by the extraordinary use of ornamental language, the suggestiveness of sensuous beauty, and of course the use of negative capability. The language is very melodic, rich with beauty, decorative effect of color, image, and effect to the five senses of it. And in the same poem Endymion, that is why he is saying a thing of beauty is joy forever. A thing of beauty is joy forever. So he downloads the beauty of nature into his poem with such an artistic potential that he gives an uniqueness to his poem. Though the difference of the imagination of different romantic poets are always exclusive. It is on the perception of their own idea. When Wordsworth is recollecting, and Coleridge is making it fancy and imagination. When you come to P.B. Shelley, then it is a mystic quality of nature that is idealizing it, rhapsodizing it for a prophetic vision. When you come to John Keats, then he is deriving the sensuous beauty of nature or ornamental language, richly suggestive, no question of recollection, but is creating by taking some of the important figures from myths, and but by incorporating the characters into the surrounding of nature in such a way that they will have a lasting influence. Because in one of his poems, the poetry of earth is never dead. The poetry of earth is never dead. The poet is describing that in the daytime, when the poetry of earth is being sung by the grasshopper, then in the night, the poetry of earth is continued by the cricket. Cricket is a kind of insect, jinkari, what you say in Odia, jinkari. So where does the poet find it? Where the poet is taking wine, sitting in his drawing room, he is in a state of elation, the state of going into the different world of elation, and is listening to the sound made by that jinkari or made by that cricket, a small insect. And the poetry of earth is continued through the object of nature. But very importantly, you find where is the cricket sitting. The cricket is sitting, the cricket is making the sound, the cricket is croaking by sitting on the chimney of the kitchen of the village people, which has been
Yes, sir.
warm. Yes,
Excuse me, sir.
yes,
Where it is mentioned? In which
yes.
page it is mentioned?
John Keats.
The poem of the John Keats.
John
In which
Keats,
page mentioned?
page number 55, book 7.
Okay.
Page number 55, book 7 onwards. You will find it. So in that particular poem, okay, please mute. In that particular poem, the cricket is sitting on the chimney, and the fire has been extinguished. The hearths are there. The chimney is slightly warm. It is totally a chilly night. But the cricket is sitting on the chimney, which is a little bit warm. It is made up of iron, and the cricket is sitting on the warm chimney to get it rid from the cold, the excessive chilly night. But this chimney is not at all a part of nature. Chimney is not nature made. A tree is nature made. Cricket is nature made. Grasshopper is nature made. Field is nature made. Tree is nature made. Bush is nature made. But chimney is not nature made. Chimney is a representation of the industrial product. So in Keats' poem, you will find even if the sensuous beauty of nature is there, sometimes he incorporates some of the advancement of the age towards industrialism. So in that kind of the mixture of the inclusion of some newer aspect is already there in the poems of John Keats. But if you come to the last poet, Lord Byron, that Lord Byron is different from Wordsworth and different from Coleridge because he was influenced by several French and German poets, and his poems are revolutionary poems. He is the hero of his own poem. We call the Byronic hero. That is why. And which is a Byronic hero? A hero which is very powerful, very daring, very passionate, very cynical, very moody, very rebellious figure. Byronic hero, because Byron comes under the romantic poets group, but he is actually possessing the Augustan wit of his predecessors, and he had a classical taste. The very simple reason is that Lord Byron, the title Lord is there, so he was belonging to an aristocratic family. So he was educated, more educated than these people, having an elitist taste in subject and in language. So he had no admiration for the rustic life and common speech of Wordsworth. So the Byronic temper is egoistical, sublime, reckless arrogance, and all that. So in his poem, you will not find the common traits of romantic poetry because you find the poems like Child Harold's Pilgrimage. It is a romantic melancholy. Nature is there, imagination is there, but the hero here contemplates on the decaying monuments of European civilization and on human achievement. How this civilization is decaying and how nature is rejuvenating it. If you go to Don Juan, another poem of Sully, you'll find it is a satire poem. So, but satire is not the subject, so not the form selected by the romantic poetry, but he selects a satire. And in the vision of judgment, it is a political satire. Don Juan is a satire poem because in those poems he is treating the themes like love, hate, patriotism, honor, disdain, revenge, despair, awe, mockery, etc. So romantic temper in the true sense of the term, traditional sense of the term, is not found in Lord Byron. His imagination is different from Wordsworth, Keats, Shelley, Coleridge, and all that. So in that sense, you can go through the book 6 and 7, and you will find the difference of treatment of role of nature, the difference of the creativity of the poet, the difference of the role of imagination, the difference of the theory of poetry that is there. So I have given you some page numbers for your reference, and you can find certain ideas with that. And if you have any doubt, then please say, because we don't have more time to discuss further. Okay, learners.
Hello, sir.
Please.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, sir.
Yes, I'm listening.
Hello.
Yes, yes. Say.
Sir, please again explain the lyrical ballad.
Lyrical ballad. Lyrical ballad is a book. Lyrical ballads. Okay. Lyrical ballads is a book. It is a book. It is a prose work. It is published in 1798 by the joint collaboration of two poets, William Wordsworth and S.T. Coleridge. But in that book, when the readers read those books, they could not become clear of what poetic theory they actually wanted to reflect in that particular work. So on the basis of their complaint or review, after 2 years in 1800, when the book was published for the second time or second edition of the book came out, then Wordsworth there added or included a preface. Preface means introduction. So in that preface, Wordsworth has wrote preface to lyrical ballads. So when you read any essay, you may get an essay on preface to lyrical ballads. So in that preface to lyrical ballads, Wordsworth has very clearly defined the poetic theory as spontaneous overflow or powerful feelings, emotions recollected in tranquility. So what is written there in lyrical ballads, the definition of poetry, explanation of poetry is more clearly, more simply redefined in the preface in a very abridged manner or shortcut manner. So it was after 2 years, made by Wordsworth because he was senior to Coleridge. That is preface to lyrical ballads.
Sir, what about Robert Burns?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Robert Burns. Robert Burns.
Yes, sir.
Robert Burns is that my love is like a red rose. So most of his poems are love poems.
Sir, what he uses folk songs particularly?
Yes, folk song obviously, because when he's writing about nature, then nature is having close proximity with
Sir, there's a question regarding like tendencies of Burns' life, writing of his folk songs or isn't on.
Yes, it is there in the page number in book number 6. Okay. Burns, you can get it. I think I have given you the page number. Robert Burns. It is there in the book number 6. You will get it. Okay. There is a particular chapter of Robert Burns.
And you just talk about James Thomson, the early romantic poet. And
James Thomson.
Yes, sir.
Which poem is
Sir, actually, he is right upon the like disasters of nature. Discuss few things.
Disasters of nature. So he is actually focusing in the particular poem. The poem is the seasons. So in that seasons, he is writing about the cyclic process of nature, the cyclic impact on life, or cyclic impact of natures on cyclic seasons on nature, and how destruction is necessary for creation. So it is a cyclic process. So he is focusing on the devastating aspect of nature for the new creation. When there will be no shedding of leaves, how can the new leaves will come?
Like the processes of nature.
Yes, cyclic process of nature. So devastation is a necessity for the new creation. That is his subject matter.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay. So for today, the time is okay. Yes, say.
Okay, sir.
Namaskar.
Sir, what is Hyperion, sir?
Yes, repeat it.
Sir, what is Hyperion and John? Hyperion.
What is Hyperion? Is the name of a poem by John Keats. It is the name of a poem written in 1819 by John Keats. Hyperion.
Sir, what are the important questions that we face from this
salient features?
Okay. Salient features one is there in our assignment also. And there's a question like comparison between Wordsworth and Keats or Wordsworth and Coleridge.
And in your book 7 also there is a chapter. I cannot exactly remember the page. There is a the chapter is romantic revival. So you read that chapter, then there will be a question also. Romantic revival. Okay. So that will be a question.
Sir, hello.
Yes.
Sir, what are the main topic written in lyrical ballad?
Lyrical ballads that describe the poetic theory of Wordsworth. poetic theory, the role of imagination and the role of poetry. That is
Okay, sir.
there. Okay. So tomorrow we shall discuss Victorian age, and till then, goodbye for today. Have a good day. Hello.
Hello, sir.